Good afternoon, everybody, all of you streaming online and all of my friends here, to the last session of Purple Cloud Summit 2022, the inaugural, I guess I could say that. Thanks to our amazing partners and sponsors, Printer 81 and Votiro, for making this happen with us at Lightspin. My name is Luke, head up marketing for Lightspin, but less of me, more of our amazing panel coming up. And please prepare your round of applause clapping for our incredible panel led with our moderator, Ashish Rajan, and he'll introduce the rest of the panel. Please join me in giving a nice big round of applause and welcome. Woo!
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, it's amazing to be in such a great company. And although Luke did a great job of introducing us so in a very succinct way, I think it's better if all of us kind of do a brief introduction. So for people who don't know me and on the live stream, hello. My name is Ashish. I run Cloud Security Podcast. It's a weekly cloud security podcast which you can find online and on your all podcast platforms and YouTube. Let's start with the introduction. Gafneet, or Falafel. Could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ashish.
That's our inside joke, by the way, if anyone's wondering.
Yeah. So my name is Gafneet Amiga. I'm Director of Security Research at Lightspin, and happy to be here.
Awesome. Rami. Oh, sorry, I'll let you guys go. Clearly, you're
My name is Rami Rahman. I'm a principal cloud security consultant for Lightstream.
Lightspin.
Very similar name, but Lightstream is a cloud consulting and security integrator. I've worked in many different positions, from across SOC operations to cloud architect to cyber research to product management. So I'm really excited because this particular space is something I've really been paying attention to the last couple of years. So I'm really happy to be here, super pumped, and thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm a chief architect in Checkmarks. And had a few positions in Checkmarks, technical and leadership ones. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben Sadegapur. Most people online have probably seen me as Nahamsek. I'm a bug bounty hunter. I've done most of my work as a bug bounty hunter and a security researcher. I've hacked into big companies like Airbnb, Snapchat, Department of Defense, and I'm currently the VP of Community and Research at Hadrian, where we work on attack surface management, which seems to be a hot topic at RSA this year.
Thank you for that quick introduction as well. And actually, while we're at it, it's probably good to know for people online and probably here as well, what was your path into cybersecurity? So maybe start with you, Ben, if you like.
I think my path is the most untraditional way of getting into cybersecurity. As a kid, I had an older brother who I used as a target. He was his computer, and I wanted to play video games, and I found ways to hack him. Back then, I didn't know what brute forcing was, but apparently that's what I was doing. And then eventually, I learned about bug bounties. Companies pay you, money to find vulnerabilities in their products. And I was like, oh, I can do that. I've done that a few times, but I just didn't know I can get money from it. And I got hooked up with a company named HackerOne. I ended up working for them and made my way into cybersecurity in the last 7 years. And I openly say I'm a poster child and product of the bug bounty community.
That's pretty awesome. Mark, over to you. What was your part?
Yeah, so I started my journey in cybersecurity in Motorola Solutions because Motorola is doing many projects for Department of Defense and public safety space. So a couple of years there as a software development manager, and then was in a small cyber company in cloud security space. And during 3 last years in Checkmarks, also as software development lead, and right now as chief architect. So that's my journey.
Sweet. Rami, over to you.
Yeah, so I got into cybersecurity right out of college, actually. I was recruited by one of my good friends that worked for a cybersecurity solutions integrator called Fishnet Security, which soon became Optiv. And I started in our security operations center. So I did a lot of ticket handling and incident management, as well as managed services for 69 of the Fortune 100, some of the Fortune 10, and that was in the SOC, and I did that for about 2 years, and I learned my ropes around cybersecurity space, a lot of tooling and technology around it, but then also some of our consulting services and our processes and our incident response processes, and this is 2009 I started, and in the beginning of my career, I was in the SOC, and then I moved into a pre-sales role or sales engineering role, and I started to develop a lot of relationships with many of these technologies that a lot of my clients were adopting in Southern California. And in Southern California, we have some pretty forward-thinking clients, not as much obviously as in NorCal, but I worked with large entertainments, large energy, large financials, and a big depth and breadth. And so I did that from 2011 until 2020. 2020, I really dove into cloud, namely cloud research, right? I was a researcher that directly reported to our Chief Technology Officer, and part of my job at Optiv was to basically rip apart all these solutions, much like this one, or put them to the ringer for our clients to prove out their value, prove out their capabilities, put them up against each other, but then also write blogs and create attack scenarios, and I started to see that there was this evolution of cloud forensics and incident response, like the evolution of how you take, types of vulnerabilities and risks that were in the data center and evolve them into cloud native terminology, evolve them so that people that are not cloud native or don't have an understanding of cloud have a relatable story to them or can actually, ingest them. And so I realized that it really needed to do a lot of work around this, and so I focused a lot on this entire space that Light's been, essentially focused on. So, and when I saw the approach, I was super, super pumped. So this is definitely an exciting time, and yeah, now I'm at Lightstream, and I'm a principal cloud security consultant, and we've already started to play around with the solution. So I'm really, really pumped about this.
Wow, awesome. That's a great panel. Kafneet, over to you. What was your part?
So I started my security path at the Prime Minister's office. Was doing mostly network analysis to observe attacks. And then I thought, well, it can be really cool to do the attacks. And I had joined to GE Digital to their cloud product. Then I learned there about application security and cloud security. From there, I moved to Salesforce, doing mainly application security, but in more big scale and to find root causes in the code. And then joined Lightspin, and mainly working on cloud security and to find more new attack vectors and remediations.
Awesome. I think it's a great panel for building the cloud to break the cloud, I guess. So we've got 3 people who do research, bug bounty, and 1 person. Well, I was blue team as well, Mark. You're with me. You and I are together on this one, so you're not alone. Funny story, I connected with Ben, your story was because you had a brother, but I had a friend who basically hacked my Hotmail account, and that was my entry into cybersecurity, because I did not know he had hacked my account until I told him that was my motivation. Like, dude, that was me. I'm like, you could have told me this 10 years ago, man. But anyways, that's a story for another time. But considering we're talking about breaking the cloud to build the cloud, I often, when I talk about this, a lot of people think that, hey, isn't pen testing illegal? At least especially for the cloud, and you get blocked, and basically you can never do this. And clearly, 3 of you are into research. Maybe, Kafneet, we can start with you on this one. Are we talking, when we say breaking the cloud, are we really talking about you guys are researching as in you're pen testing the cloud? Or what is this? So people on the internet and otherwise understand this. What are you guys doing?
We don't have the intention to pen test the cloud. Specifically in Lightspin, what we do as part of the research to understand better the services. So we deep dive into how they're implemented and what are the features and how they're interacted with each other. So sometimes, ideas are coming up and you think, well, so how really is it implemented in backend, and what could happen if I will do that? And this is how we can find things, but I think that it's different. It's not about pen testing the cloud. It's good because each vulnerability that you found and report about it, the provider fix it, and it makes our all safer. But it's more about, cloud research is more about to understand how it works and how can we assist the developers and the users to implement their workload safely in the cloud.
Any thoughts, Rami or Ben? You guys are the, there you go, Rami?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about a scenario where my coworkers were scared to death to give me cloud credentials because I was a noob in it, right? So I was kind of like the wild child when it came to this. So I just started to think about different ways to weaponize like IAM roles, right? And I remember being able to attach the AWS System Session Manager to pretty much any instance that I had in my coworker's cloud, and all of a sudden I had root access and I didn't need the password to it, right? So much like you said, like, just think about ways that, how do you like reverse engineer or create like scenarios that are, these are intended services, but use them in a way that maybe maps to something that's in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, or use them in ways that they're not intended to because they're overly exposed, there's too much IAM. And so that was kind of the experiments that we did on my team, and it was a lot of fun. It wasn't necessarily like we were pen testing the cloud. We were pen testing our cloud, and that for us helped us understand how to create talking points for our clients.
And Ben?
For me, it's both. Because one is, from an organization that I work for, our job is to identify their assets, and we mimic automation with red team automation. So we're constantly, for our customers, it is pen testing for them, and they have given us the permission to do so. But from a bug bounty perspective, it's different. There are almost every large organization has a bug bounty program that you can do, and almost everybody's on the cloud, or they have their own in-house IP block, but everyone's migrating into the cloud. So for me, it's mostly thinking of how does an adversary think? What is their objective? My objective is, as an adversary, to mimic that is to get into the company, and I feel like almost every organization is literally one IAM role permission away from a breach, right?
Yeah.
So my job personally, when I do these things with bug bounties, I can't go that route unless they give me the permission to, and most companies are happy to give us that permission.
Yep.
But with everyone being on the cloud, it's literally what you're saying. We are pen testing most applications on the cloud, and in some cases, for me, when I do security research, is doing at mass almost every company that they've given me permission to do, which is a large percentage of the internet as well.
Sounds like you guys are doing social service more than anything else. And you get paid for it as well. It's a good thing.
It's kind of like a mix of a Robin Hood meet Batman.
By finding the bugs so you can save the poor who probably don't have the time for it to find out. I was going to ask, maybe flip the script for Mark and me, I guess in this context. What are some of the challenges that do you reckon people have, at least on the blue team side? Obviously, we don't actively research. People don't talk about active research. So it's a great thing that we have a panel and we're talking about, hey, we should break the cloud so you can build it, and would love to go into the vulnerabilities that you discovered as well. What are the challenges with cloud and protecting cloud? Is there thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I think most of the challenges in protecting cloud is the variety of attacks that can come to it, right? So it's always much more difficult to protect rather than attack, right? So I think this is one of the crucial factors in which blue teams have a hard time to do it. And second, I think the second factor is the human factor that we have. Many times we are preparing for some malicious users attacking our infrastructure or applications, but in many circumstances, many cases, it's like just not the right usage of different services, like phishing attacks or maybe other types of illegal usage that come from inside. So it's really hard, in my opinion, to get prepared to those kind of attacks. That's what I think.
Yeah, awesome. Ben, did you have some thoughts as well?
Yeah, I think also with the cloud stuff is like every provider is different. It's not a one process fits all.
Yep.
It's not like everyone uses the same services, and like every single one of these companies have new products or hundreds of products that you need an engineer for this product.
Yep.
An engineer for that product. And I think there's only maybe like, I want to say maybe, I don't know if it's a real number, but I feel like there's only like a handful of people that know exactly how to log down an Amazon account properly. Because there isn't enough content on it. I can't even wrap myself, my head around using Amazon AWS stuff, but I feel like not everyone knows how to, separate things and gate them, separately. So these things are not, when they're not supposed to talk to each other, they don't talk to each other. But I feel like people don't take that time to do it because we don't have enough education for it.
No, I think, and you touched a good point, because Amazon, if you look at documentation from Amazon or Microsoft, they're encouraging people to put stuff on the internet, because I understand it's the easiest way to learn something. Put it in the end. If you try to explain networking, people just will not get it. But if you just say, hey, put this virtual machine on the internet, you can access it and learn all this, there is no incentive for them to teach security. I think the other part that I personally felt was, to what you said, not enough people, but then when they come into your organization, build something, they walk away, and you're like, you're basically holding a piece of rotten tomato in your hand, for lack of a better word. What do you do with that? So, I don't know, Rami, you had some thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, how about just the growing number of new services that come out in the cloud every week, right? Like, how do you lock down the Amazon Lexbox service that they just come, things that just come out of nowhere, that we never had before. Blue teams don't have experience with. They hardly have enough experience with cloud to be comfortable. Now you have a new service that can be either weaponized or has, some type of vulnerability or just risk, right? Some risk, I'm interested to see what happens when it comes to actually attacking serverless functions, right?
Yeah.
Something that we've never really had to blue team for. For anyone who wants to kind of test this out, there's actually a damn serverless web application, right? So it's an overly vulnerable serverless web application. It's kind of cool. It's a website with a bunch of video games, and it runs on serverless. That's kind of one of my goals for this summer. That's my summer project, is to do some pen testing.
I'm glad summer is almost here, so you can get rid of that. Did you have some thoughts as well, Ben? Or?
No, I mean, everything, it's not to really add on to it, but also like when organizations are developing things in the early startup days, security isn't your worry. Making sure things are properly gated, they aren't your, you don't worry about them. And then there's a new person that comes in, there's an architect person that comes in, and suddenly overnight, over a few years, over a few months, they're supposed to clean everything up without any downtime, without any issues, right? So I think there's both educational content, but also security is almost everyone's last worry, when it should be the first thing they worry about when we see products being launched.
Sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to add that another thing that can make their life harder is that it's not always clear what is the line in the shared responsibility model.
Good point.
Because it's different in different services.
Yep.
So it will be really easier if there will be some in each service, and there are lots of services. In each service in the security section, it will be written what is my responsibility as a user, and what is the security responsibility that I'm covered by the provider.
I really like that idea, like a services-specific shared responsibility model.
Yeah.
Right.
We may have a new startup idea.
Yeah. That could be a great startup. Like, we could have just built walking away from this startup idea right
We got to go.
Yeah.
I'll have my lawyer call it.
People on live stream are already building up a prototype, and it's like totally go next level. Actually, it's a good point. Maybe it's a good point to segue into the vulnerability that I guess you discovered around the AWS SageMaker. You could tell the audience a bit about that, and for folks on live stream who may not have heard about the Juniper notebook thing that you discovered. What was the thought process there, and why is it bad?
Yes, sure. So there are lots of users who are using Jupyter notebook services. It's a machine learning tool, very popular tool. And one thing at Lightspeed that we're doing is to research the services. So we wanted to understand what can be the attack surface in this service implemented by AWS. So we deployed one and started to play around with it. And we saw that even though that this is your instance and you get your own subdomain, the parent domain is shared between all the instances, which means that if I have a notebook and another one has a notebook in different account, we both have the same parent domain. We can have a different subdomain. And then all the security vulnerabilities in this zone can get into, like XSS, and that can help you to override the CSRF cookie, and then it led to a CSRF. And then, since it's a notebook that runs on an EC2 instance, you can get the attached role. So this is like kind of by click you can reach to a victim Jupyter notebook and steal the attached credentials of the role. So this is the impact of the issue. But what we wanted to show with that is that it's not always that easy to take services that we know, such as Jupyter Notebook, and there is also another one, like in the Postgres example. You really need to understand good how the product is working in order to make it managed. So yes, this is the vulnerability.
Sweet. I'm glad you've discovered it. Ben, any thoughts on this from your side?
I've had my fair share of Jupyter messes that I have dealt with bug bounties. So I've actually never, I was just talking to Peter about this. Like we were talking about it, I said, hey, I don't know what this thing is. I just have vulnerabilities on it, and I know it's on the cloud, and when you find things on the cloud, it can escalate very quickly, right? I think that's just an instance of saying, so for my example, I found, I come from a strictly black box, no access to internals, no source code access, nothing. So I just spray things across the network, and I pray something comes back.
Right.
In the instance of Jupyter, I actually was a few bigger organizations. I was able to do similar things, but mine instance was from an outside perspective of an adversary. For their instance, for Lightsman's research was a self-XSS, where you have access to the application, you have to input something of your own, or you find a way to trick the user to do that input of itself. So actually, literally 30 minutes before this panel, I pulled her aside and I was like, hey, this thing you just did research on, I ran into this thing 3 years ago. I just didn't know this existed. I didn't know you can own the cloud with it. I just knew that I had access to something that I wasn't supposed to have access to. But my vector was different. Similar attack was a cross-site scripting. Mine was through a different method. But I had no idea that how extreme this is, because I didn't have the experience in working with cloud providers or working with things that are deployed in the clouds and understanding what these applications do. So yeah, it's cool seeing your research from Rightspin and going, oh, okay, like there are first of all, there's other vectors to this, but also like you learn some of these tools that are being used for development purposes, and the CIDC, whatever the cycle is that they're being used, it takes one mistake in that cycle for the entire company to get owned. And in this case, could be the Jupyter network itself, which could be either, for my instance, it was hosted on a company employer's laptop where I could have owned that employee, versus for them was on an AWS instance where you can own the entire IAM role, for example, an IAM stance. So it's cool seeing different perspective of how you can put yourself in the middle of all these different attacks and the scenarios and these life cycles of things being developed and being able to own or get into the organization.
Sounds like you should exchange details and probably go deeper in the research. Way ahead of this already. Did you have some thoughts as well, Rami, on this?
No. I mean, I was just thinking kind of the same thing along the lines of like, there's just a lot of different things in cloud that we haven't adopted before. A lot of those things in the cloud are deploying from pipelines that are from other software components. Like, your supply chain right now is probably one of the things that you really have to have under control when it comes to your software components, right? Because we've already seen things like poison NPM packages, and I mean, there could be everything. Everything could have been airtight, made in a proper manner in your cloud. But if you don't have kind of the concept of like a zero trust pipeline, or if you don't actually if you don't pay attention to your supply chain, you could potentially find yourself with things like crypto miners, or things like unsigned certificates, or things like poison packages. And I think that's the thing that's going to catch a lot of people off guard moving forward. Right.
I'm looking at Mark now. I'm going, Mark, being the blue team, you and I, does this make you question the trust in cloud that people have these days? Listening to these three, I feel like, this feel like probably things still yet to be discovered. Does this still instill trust in cloud for you? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, recent reports show that customers trust cloud more than ever before, right? So I think we have two forces here. On one side, all difficulties and challenges in protecting cloud, And on the other side, people really, the main drivers is the ability to deliver value and to innovate. And, cloud service providers giving much more level of protection and security than we had before on premises or whatever infrastructure that we had before. So I think the trust is going up on one side, but on the other side, there are much more challenges in keeping this trust, in keeping this level of confidence that customers have in this, right?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome because I read an article recently from a reporter. They were talking about this space, and it was really interesting. I wonder if it get to a point where you can start asking for pen test reports from AWS or Azure and go, well, I'm spending like, what, $20,000, $30,000 per day with you guys. At the least thing I can expect is a pen test report, right? Because, I mean, how else do I build trust? Yes, you're doing it, but then people like Gafneet and you guys are doing an awesome job finding this thing, raising the bar to say, wait, I definitely deserve access to the pen test report. What are you guys doing there that people outside have to find these things for you? So maybe another question for you, Mark, then. What are your thoughts on the whole research space? Do you think it should be encouraged? And in general, the cloud research space is still very fairly new, and I'd love to have your thoughts on this as well. But Mark, as a person on the other side of the table, I guess, with me, what are your thoughts on the whole cloud research space?
I mean, we have many opportunities for research in the cloud space, mainly because we have the capacity and the capabilities that we didn't have before, from processing perspective, and the access to the data that we didn't have. And I think the main turning point is to get from the reactive mode to the proactive mode, right? Meaning, so far, we were mainly dealing with what we already know, right? We had the attack, and we tried to react to this attack. But I think most of the research, or one of the parts where the research can go, is to use advanced techniques like predictive analytics, machine learning, and other techniques that will allow us to detect those attacks before they even happen, right? So I think many of the research will be done there. And, beyond that, all capabilities related to auto-remediation, for example, being able to react more quickly when we already discover this attack, could be also a nice domain for that.
Awesome. It's funny, I'm going back to what Rami, you said earlier about the services coming in. The first thought that came to my mind when I was listening to Mark is AWS reInvent and Reinforce are coming in. Probably another 500 services will be released at that point in time. And Mark and I, people like all of you would be like, yes, we have more services to break, I guess, but all of us are going to be like, oh my God, there's more services to protect. But I'm curious from your thoughts on the cloud security research space as to, I mean, Gafneet, we can start with you. Do you feel, I guess, is there more awareness about the space? There enough people in the space at the moment, or is there an education piece missing in people realizing that, oh, I can, to what Ben was saying earlier, he found vulnerabilities in the Juniper project, the product outside of the cloud space, but clearly the cloud space has been adopting a lot of open source. They bring it in, they put the lipstick on and make, hey, this is an Amazon service now, whatever you want to call it, Amazon something something. So what are your thoughts on the cloud research space as it stands today? And what can we do to actually educate more people on?
So I definitely think that we need more researchers in this space, and we can. It's our responsibility to educate and to give whatever we can. And this is why I think that if we do some kind of a research, it doesn't have to have an exploit vulnerability at the end. Even just the research itself, it's good enough to publish it. Like how things are working behind the scenes, if you can get to some answer to some of the things, it can really help. I use lots of other researchers' posts about how they think and what they did and how they think that the service is working. It helps me. So I'm trying to do the same and to write as much as I can about the technical details. And I also think that there is more awareness because lots of companies are moving heavily to the cloud. So it's happening even if we don't want it to happen. This happening. And yes, and I think it's good. I think it's good because the cloud is safe. It's safe, and the fact that we see more and more reports. It's because it gets more attention these years, and there are more researchers, and I'm happy about that going into the cloud zone and finding very cool stuff. And yes, and this is it.
Should grow more, right?
Yeah, I think that we need to find more, but really it's more about like publish whatever you research on, and it can help. You don't know who is going to help, but it will help.
Awesome. So people on the live stream would have heard this, and they look, probably the startup idea, and now people are going to research as well. There you go. These two things that come out of this is probably the best thing. Rami, some thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I'd like to see some of the cloud providers themselves collaborate with other cloud providers, right? In terms of like overall research, like maybe the cloud providers can create kind of a standard to, these are the minimum security guidelines we want to have until we release a service, like globally, because it doesn't matter if you're going to adopt serverless functions on Azure or AWS or Google, right? Like we need a standard for a lot of these things that never came about before, right? Now the CIS is traditionally that standard, but I mean, even the CIS benchmark is going to have to catch up with some of these things, right? MITRE has done a really good job of actually publishing a lot of the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we see out in the wild that are being weaponized, but that is the reactive way to do this. It would be a lot better if we just created if you are a cloud, period, this is the standard you align to, right? What about Oracle and Alibaba? How are those standards going to come into play? Those actually are, and when it comes to Alibaba, they're operating in a different country, right? So there are going to be in-country related types of interconnectivity, global kind of collaboration that has to happen from a research perspective in order for this technology to actually come together and for our people to adopt it globally in a right way. Otherwise, you're always going to have kind of this sprawl of everybody or every cloud provider is going to do it a different way, and they're going to have their different standards and different controls. Some of them are going to work better than others, but ultimately, the people that need the most help are the clients that consume that cloud, and it would be nice to have like a better collaborative effort across all clouds for a standard, period.
It's going to be interesting because I just realized, as you said that, Alibaba is an example. Alibaba doesn't have a bug bounty program. So it's like, so Oracle has it, Google Cloud has it, Azure has it, and so does Amazon, but there's no, I haven't found one, but it'll be
They have a vulnerability disclosure program.
So they do? Oh, there you go. Perfect. Thanks for that. So, and what are your thoughts on the whole research space, man? Like, do you feel we need another startup in this space?
I think transparency is really important when it comes down to security. Not from a research perspective only, of researchers putting things out there to educate each other, but also for companies to do the same. What do you think? What happened? Why did things go wrong? Why just share it internally? I know a few companies they do this already. When the vulnerability comes out, there's a breach of a minor breach happens. I know that you don't want to disclose why a breach happened. I completely understand. You have your investors to worry about. There's all these chain of commands that you have to go up. But for vulnerabilities, if you can do a post-analysis of why was this vulnerability discovered, share the code, maybe snippets of it, what was vulnerable. I know that there's disadvantage of it from a business perspective, but also it helps to move an entire security industry forward, because while we're not using the same products, but we are writing similar code for similar products, and it could save other companies or other products from being owned or introducing a new vulnerability because they're using similar code or similar techniques to do something different. So I think transparency and disclosure is a big deal. Allowing security researchers to publish their talks, not waiting for, not to have to drop your research as an O-Day anonymously is a big deal, because a lot of researchers are bounded to NDAs that we talked about this a little bit earlier, was like they have NDAs or they have to play by certain rules that a company imposed on them, and then that research just stays there because they can't talk about it for whatever reason. I think there's room for improvement for a lot of these things, both from the research community, but also from a corporation or from a product perspective, to disclose things to help push the community forward.
Talking about disclosing sorry, I'll let you finish.
One thing I wanted to add to that too, in the realm of transparency, like how about having, like whenever there's a celebrity vulnerability coming out, like a Log4j or similar. I remember specifically looking at something like a Sonar Cube that had a Log4j vulnerability, and they put out an advisory for us. Well, this Log4j vulnerability is actually an Elasticsearch. It's actually not something that is can be exploited. I'd like to see that the testing that they did, right? Because when I was on a research team and we'd have some of these new like celebrity vulnerabilities of the du jour, what it seems like these days, we'd be like, all right, great, let's go test it. Let's go prove it out. Let's see if it actually can happen, right? And it'd be cool to see some of these vendors that have these vulnerabilities in their environment and be like, look, we tested for this Log4j vulnerability. We did that. Here are the steps that we did it. This is how, these are the parameters that where it can be exploited. And then it would make people feel a lot better if they actually were transparent in how they tested and verified that we are, and rather than just saying we are not susceptible to Log4j because this is related to an Elasticsearch stack within our product, right?
And it's funny you mentioned the celebrity vulnerability as well, and with the Log4j example, it's a great segue to my next question around when we find on one, like companies, when you find yours, I think I had to remember it as a Jupyter notebook vulnerability rather than a CVE, something which is scored 900 or whatever. Why is there no CVE or number attached to these things? Or is that even a fair comparison to have it as a CVE number? What are your thoughts on this? Let's go the entire way after that. What do you think? Yeah. Why is there no CVE number?
Well, so this is a very popular question these days.
So hard to remember a Jupyter name. Why not just put a CV 1, 2, 3, 4 against it?
Yeah, it will be easier to remember the number.
That's right. So why not?
So personally, I think that CVs are going more with vulnerabilities that the end user needs to fix because let's say, for example, that there is a vulnerability and I want to talk with someone and tell him, hey, your environment is vulnerable to this CVE number. Here, check out what is this and fix it. And there is no need for that in specific cloud vulnerabilities issues, such as the Jupyter Notebook. Because in this kind of vulnerabilities, the provider fixes it for you. So you don't need usually to take any action. Maybe you need to upgrade, and this is a question that we need to think about if it's necessary in an upgrade, but in most of the cases, they fix it for you in the backend, and this is the beauty of being in the cloud and being protected by this shared responsibility model. And I do think that the transparency, as Ben said, is important. So for each one of these vulnerabilities, I do think that a full disclosure should be out there with explanations about the bug and the fix and who was vulnerable and what was the impact, what are the results of the investigation, how they did the investigation, and if there is any action that the users needs to take.
Right, so to go back to because you discovered the XSS thing way before on the Jupyter thing as well. So if
completely different things. Yeah,
right, because that
same product, two different injection points.
Yeah, because that makes me think that if, say, Amazon embodies that version, which is the infected version, for lack of a better example, and you don't find that out, and people like Mark and I and Rami, we're all basically using it like, oh my God, it's a shared responsibility, so cool. But if you don't disclose because you didn't know the impact it could have from a cloud perspective, right? So I would have thought, that's why maybe I thought CVE number were important, but I don't know, Ben, you seem to have some thoughts.
I couldn't disclose it because I couldn't.
Oh, you couldn't? Oh.
I couldn't talk about it. It's multiple billion-dollar industries that, so with what I do is, sometimes I don't know I'm finding a 0-day. You know, I was talking about this earlier and I said, I found a 0-day someday and I reported to a bug bounty program not knowing it's a vulnerability in something that I found. And then there is a list of engineers that are listed with me that were just on the receiving end of this triaging vulnerability that I sent in that found out this was something that needs to be fixed from the end of the product itself. So that's why I nicely said transparency is a big part of security, because if I would have disclosed this research 3 years ago, we could have done something more with it, because for my instance was completely attacking a product that was within an internal infrastructure. So it was within you had to have it sitting on the internal network for it to work, versus for her case was, no, you just have to have the launch instance and figure out how to exploit it. But imagine if you put the two of those together. But that's why it's hard to do these things, because, you know, for my case, I was told, well, you can't disclose this. I mean, I think I'm going to eventually get their permission. It's 3 years later. I'm going to probably ask for it now at this point.
Oh, you're still waiting for approval?
It was just solved a couple of days ago now.
Also, that means still there in AWS, then I guess.
I don't know. The company that I did was not related.
No disclosures
But
here.
yes, hopefully it could get disclosed. But at the end of the day, that's what I mean. It's like if I would have disclosed this, it would have given her research a boost of knowing there is an injection point. Maybe that fixed this part, but can we attack it from a different perspective? Or can we leverage this vulnerability if it's not fixed? Because who knows, it might be the same version still, right? So that's what the transparency thing is huge.
And do you reckon, what's your thoughts on the whole CVE, CWE for the cloud space?
For the cloud space, I think a lot of the stuff is it affects more on, so let's say if it's a vulnerability in the infrastructure itself, it only affects that cloud service provider. And a lot of times with the things that I find, there are different techniques being combined or chain of techniques being combined. That's not so much of a vulnerability in a product that could, affect a percentage of the internet. For Log4j, the internet was a dumpster fire for a while, and it still is because of it. So those things I don't think affect that large of a percentage of the stuff that's on the internet for it to become a number. I would ask, but also I'm the person that says who cares about CVE numbers. I think they're great to track things, but I don't, I love having CVEs under my name, but at the end of the day, I don't get them. But at the end of the day, I think for the cloud stuff specifically is a chain of techniques that people are finding to exploit a particular thing or a particular human mistake that's happened in the chain of creating that application or that process that's made it vulnerable.
Right. And Rami, any thoughts on the whole CVE, CWE?
Yeah, I mean, the concept of having a cloud-specific CVE has been talked about now several times, and I think to some degree it kind of falls in line with my expectation that there should be that standard as well, right? But maybe there is a use case for having a shared responsibility CVE or shared or a CSP CVE, right? Like cloud providers
to a cloud provider.
Yeah, it's like specific to cloud providers, right?
Yeah.
Because that way, at the end of the day, like, what if you want to become a cloud provider yourself? Like, if anyone else wants to become a cloud provider, we only have 7 or 8 that are huge.
That's
right?
another startup idea for the people. There's only 7.
We need to start writing these down.
Right. But
This should be offline. This should not be online on the live stream.
In the concept of keeping things consistent, of being a provider for cloud, just like a telco provider needs to make sure that you can dial 911, right, and actually locally deploy local 911, you're a cloud provider. You should have your own version of like some type of adherence to a 911. Right. Some type of and at that point, I mean, I'm sure in the case of Alibaba, this is probably already all tuned up. They probably have, hooks into the Chinese government where there's an ability to be able to disclose things to the Chinese government, and that's how they run things. That's fine. I mean, we should have some type of governance around that if you're a cloud provider. Right? And part of that can be a cloud standard and a tracking of those bugs for you as a cloud provider.
I should not smile at this because live streaming, the Chinese government might be listening in, bashing Chinese government over here. You guys are awesome, by the way, in case you're listening.
No, I mean,
just in case, just to be safe.
Yeah.
Did you have some thoughts as well, Ben, just to add on to that? Or Mark, over to you. Any thoughts?
So yeah, I will just echo what you guys said about it. It's like we need those points of reference to treat specific vulnerabilities on one side. On the other side, it's not always clear, right? Whose responsibility to disclose it, to fix it at the end of the day. But I feel like there is a need for some kind of common databases for all those cloud security vulnerabilities, which I don't think exist at the moment. It's like focus on those gray areas many times, right?
It's funny. I literally 2 weeks ago, because I couldn't find one either, I just started a GitHub page just for that, because I just started recording everything in one place, because I couldn't find it. Yeah. So yeah, well, you can check out my GitHub. I can take a plug right there.
Sure.
So this final question, if you could fix one thing in cloud security, what would that be? And maybe Ben, we can start over there.
I think there's a lot that can be fixed. I'm big on the attack surface management stuff, and I think there's got to be an easier way to know what you have in the cloud.
Yep.
We're looking at recon.cloud earlier, and it shows a list, but is that everything really that a company owns? It still amazes me that I find something where I can't tell if it belongs to a company, and the engineers on the other side can't tell me if it belongs to them, and I'm like, oh, I rely on you for this information.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we really need to fix to know, like, okay, who owns this thing? Like someone's deployed this. It's here. It's vulnerable. Like who is responsible for this thing? Maybe add some sort of a way where the organization ID is disclosed or something where you can point and say, hey, is this your organization, your sub-organization? Something where, I don't know if having a directory would be a good idea, honestly, but I don't want a yellow book thing. I don't want those anymore, but there's got to be somewhere where I could tell, hey, is this yours? And you can tell me with 100% accuracy, no, this does not belong to us.
That's a good point. Mark, thoughts on one thing that you could wish we could fix in cloud security?
I think one of the things I wish we could fix is helping end users, developers, not to do those mistakes that they can do right now, right? Most of the attacks coming from misconfigurations and human mistakes. And with this proliferation of cloud services, it's so easy to do such mistakes, right? So I wish it was some magic way of shifting left this process of catching those misconfigurations and security vulnerabilities and just warning the users ahead of time, right? That's my wish.
Yes, thank you. Rami?
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, my thing would be fix people, right? Get people to level up more and get them to be more focused on, like you said, shifting left and getting a lot of these things identified before they actually go and be deployed to production. They can't be taken down and they're making lots of money, right? Some minor amount of planning and thought into making sure that things are planned out properly and identified early is a good way to do that. And sometimes it is that human firewall or the human element to it, right? In terms of not even just the code, but how about just the governance model around the code, how the code gets deployed, how it gets socialized. What are we doing to make sure that there's improvements to it from a human perspective, right? I think that's the part that it becomes more and more difficult every day to educate after a client's deployed these applications out for them to come back and say, these are vulnerable, these are at risk, now go mitigate this, because now they have this groaning moment where you just gave me a bunch of work, right? And I could have given you less work if we just planned this out a little bit better. So maybe more people that are more proficient in making secure applications and infrastructure that they reside on with a propensity to want to learn more, right, around creating, making a more secure world.
Say the best for the last, Kafneet. What are your thoughts on one thing you could fix about cloud security?
Well, so I think that it's about to make it more simple. There are lots of complex services and critical services such as IAM and S3 that are in the cloud providers, and it's not that easy to configure them. And this is why humans, and there are lots of misconfigurations because there are so many combination options for the configurations. Like in S3, you have the option for the 4 checkbox if you want to block public access, and you have the ACL, you have the built-in policy of the resource base in the S3, and you have the IAM identity. It's a mix of all of that, and you need to digest it all into, well, so my bucket is public or not. So to make it more simple can help to reduce human errors.
That's pretty good. So simplicity, transparency, shifting left, and shared responsibility per service. So we have 2 startups. We have basically 4 ways to improve cloud security. This is awesome. This has been a great panel, by the way. Thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for sharing your opinion as well. I think Luke is already ready with his next gigo, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming in. I'm going to give you a huge round of applause for everyone, please. Thank you.
We have questions. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, any questions from the crowd?
So I like the idea and the conversation about the new CVE for cloud. I actually personally think that's a job for the NIST NVD, since that's
fair.
why they're there. That's what our tax dollars are paying for, so let's use it for that. I don't want another DB. I want them to step up, and and then on the same lines of the vendors stepping up, I mean, I'm from enterprise many, many years, and from change control land many, many years, QA test prod, and now cloud is QA test and prod. And our cloud vendors aren't telling us when, as you said, they're introducing a new feature, and they didn't really document it, and no one's really knowing, well, how is it supposed to be used, as you said? You know, what's your responsibility as a consumer? And so when those things are introduced, when those new features, why aren't they telling us that this is no longer version 3 of AWS? We've gone to 3.3, or now this is a major change. We're on 4.0. I need version numbers for my clouds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think things like instance metadata service is a good example of that too. Like that's probably the one that was the biggest, that obviously a V2 was a big change, and we know why. But I agree with you. Like, how about just overall? Like we've gotten onto, you know, another phase, and we, you know, maybe that could prompt people to want to go and learn what this new phase or new version is all about, right? It's kind of like release notes for the cloud. You don't see that.
I also want versions on my IAM roles. If there's a new entitlement,
Yeah.
that is now a new door.
There you go, unsolved problem. Another startup, maybe, I guess. Any other question from the, hopefully that answered your question. Any other question from the crowd? Going once, going twice, and sold. All right, over to you, Luke. Thanks again. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your opinions with everyone. Thank you.
Give it up for the panel. Thank you, guys. Thank you.